Who has to administer the Constitution. The politician who oversees it, judges make the decisions, of course, but he oversees the system, is the Minister of Justice, Ronald Lamola. He joins us now. Minister, good afternoon to you. I mean, the Constitution is a piece of paper. I have it with me here as a book. But it's a lot more than that. It's a set of rules, it's a set of ideas, it's a set of promises. How would you describe the Constitution?
Well, indeed, Stephen, is the document that binds us together as South Africans. That brings all our aspirations, it brings all the rules, and it sets the guidelines through which we can put legislations and policies that can govern our country. So it is the supreme law. It is the guardian of everything that we do as a country. And indeed, as you have said, it is the most important document we have.
There's no doubt of how important it is. I mean, it's because of this that the government cannot remove my right to life or your right to life. It's because of this that our government has to give you medical treatment if you have COVID-19. Do you think we understand how important the Constitution actually is? It underpins everything.
Yeah, I do think that a lot can still be done in terms of educating the nation, in terms of the role of the Constitution. We also have done our best to achieve some of the lofty ideals of the Constitution with regards to access to water, access to electricity, and equitable redress in terms of water and the economy. But there is still a need for equitable access to land by the people of this country. There is still a need for equitable access in terms of economy and the high rate of unemployment to be resolved. So there's still a lot of challenges that we do have as a country. But I think the Constitution gives us a perspective in terms of guidance that all of us, we need to put our hands together to fight to achieve the ideals of the Constitution.
So we need to fight. Where do we go? I mean, one of the things the Constitution lets us do is argue, right? And I mean, we see that in South Africa all the time. I mean, we argue, and that sometimes, I think, is what we have in common, is that we like to have a discussion. And I think that's something that's really changed in our society. But I sometimes think that people just feel there's no direction. And that's a huge problem in our country right now, a lack of direction.
Well, there is a direction, because obviously there is leadership at the executive level in terms of cabinet. But there is a role for civil society to play. There is also a role for private sector to play, which I find that I think that is where we may be talking past each other, whereas we do need each other, all of us, to put our hands together to ensure that the ideals of the Constitution, what is in the National Development Plan, becomes a reality for the people of our country. It will not only be achieved by only government, but all of us have a role to play to build this nation that our forefathers envisaged.
So, I mean, you talk about the work that we need to do. Our Constitution says that if you fall in love with someone as the same gender as you, you can marry them. If you fall in love with someone who's a different gender to you, you can marry them. But our Constitution also says that women have the right to walk at night and not be attacked by a man, that they have the right to be in a relationship and not be raped in that relationship, that not to be a victim of violence at the hands of men. We have the Constitution, and yet we also live in a country, unfortunately, shaped by violence. Why have we failed in trying to live the dream of the Constitution? What went wrong?
Yeah, indeed, Susan, our violent past has crept into the new society in terms of people still behaving in an abhorrent manner, in a manner that is barbaric, particularly against women and children, and also against the LGBTQI community. But this cannot be left, as I've said, to government alone. People, wherever they are, where you see this kind of behavior, you need to play a role to report it to the relevant authorities and ensure that it does not happen. Because the first step that we need to do is to protect and prevent it from happening. By the time the criminal justice system comes into the state, the damage has already been done. But the first step is that society needs, with all in unison, condemn any kind of abhorrent behavior that is barbaric, that is backward, particularly against the vulnerable communities. If it does happen, the criminal justice system has to play its role. Hence, even ourselves, as you will have seen from time to time, we have put together sexual offences courts that are victim-centric to respond to some of these challenges that end up crippling into our criminal justice system. I think if all of us play our role, these things can be prevented, but also where they happen, they can be uprooted in the face of society.
Leadership is crucial to this, and you've spoken about that already. But, I mean, we have situations now, for example, where we saw the violence in KwaZulu-Natal and Gauteng back in July. I mean, that's clearly unconstitutional. And we see no arrests, really. We don't really see anyone being held accountable. You can't have a constitution without accountability, and I'm afraid to say that's got to be a failure of government, of governance and government, and a failure of the police. We have a police commissioner who doesn't really explain why nothing was done. I mean, that, I'm afraid to say, is the fault of the government that you're a part of.
Yeah, obviously, that is where we have to be held accountable by the institutions that are there, which are aimed to protect the democracy. As you have seen, there is an inquiry by the Human Rights Commission. Also in Parliament, we are held accountable on all those issues. And it is where the reality of constitutional democracy must thrive. And we in terms of the constitution, we are expected to also make sure that there is safety and security in the country, which is what we must be held accountable against. And we continue to work hard to achieve some of those objectives. Hence, you will be aware that we immediately triggered the process to have quick processes in our courts to prioritize those matters that will have emerged from that mayhem that happened in around July and June, to ensure that the law is swift and there is decisive action. And all those people that are being taken through the processes, we are hopeful that the law will indeed take its course.
Minister, I really appreciate the time today. Thank you. The Minister of Justice, Ronald, speaking to us 25 years after the Constitution was signed into law.